Before we get into the meat of this video, one thing I'd like to say is you'd think this argument would come down to which weapon can best chase someone using a blood ring, but I don't know if it's because I'm just rusty or out of practice and just haven't properly played the game in a while, but I found with both weapons I wasn't able to catch someone who was just running away from me the whole fight with blood ring. I found it so hard to apply the pressure. So when it comes down to which weapon can best chase someone down who's running away with magic and blood ring, I have no idea which one it is. I failed both times, one shot short of getting him, but yeah. Anyway, on with the video. When it comes to the physical straight swords, there are two very interesting ones in the Lothric Holy Sword and the Ring Knight Straight Sword. Now both have very different ARs and very different weapon arts, so you might think it might be easy to consider which one is better than the other, but when you look at the builds that they both play on, they both are relatively used on the exact same quality build, but the damage output and the weapon arts are very different. So when you're thinking which is better, I think it mostly comes down to the weapon art. So I've got a couple of duels that I've got in the background here. This is all post commentary. So I played for about 5 hours when Soul was streaming because I was trying to snipe him, but I thought I could collect footage on some meme builds to try out some of these weapons. I went mostly with the Holy Sword first, then I swapped to the Ring Knight Straight Sword, and then I swapped between them. I had way too many clips. In fact, whilst I was editing this together and cutting the clips together, I hadn't even really got halfway through my level of clips before I reached the 50 cap, because unfortunately Share Factory has a maximum setting, so unfortunately I've only got my first 50 clips. I couldn't get any more in towards the end of it. But when it came to playing my opponents, especially against parry spammers, I noticed Lothric Holy Sword had a huge advantage, because most people when they go for a set parries pretty easily like to read, and you're not always going to be in a good position to be able to backstab that. So in positions where I wasn't in a good position to backstab a parry spammer, the weapon art was just absolutely fantastic, doing 200 to 300 depending on their setup damage, to, you know, really punish those parry attempts. Unfortunately, both of them are purely physical. I know Ring Knight Straight Sword has like 1 chip damage that it'll do through Black Knight Shield, but overall, you can't really reliably go through shields as you could with a Dark Infused Lothric Knight Sword. It's a Dark Infused Gotthards Twin Sword, it's Dark Infused anything really. But I found that being able to punish someone, like when someone's whiffing, because the Ring Knight Straight Sword and the Lothric Holy Sword are both very long, you can normally outspace and punish a lot of people. But you're not always going to be on a good connection to be able to do that. Like, when it comes to spacing, you really need to be on a good connection to punish people. And unfortunately, when you're playing in the arena these days, one thing that I did notice that was quite surprising, it was incredibly active. I thought since Monster Hunter World came out, this game would be dead. But I found that this game is more active now than it was during DLC launch. Like, DLC 1, not DLC 2. And that was quite impressive. Like, I found it very hard to find the same people again. I found it very hard to even get Soul Glaciers when I was watching his stream trying to line up sniping him. But when it came to a lot of my opponents, like I was saying before, with the lane team, because you're playing people normally outside of your region, a lot of Australian, Americans, Japanese players, I was finding it was much easier and safer to punish people with the weapon art of the Holy Sword, whereas the weapon art, even on lag, is very easy to parry for the Ring Knight Straight Sword. So as you can see in these duels here, I've got a shield build that I've got going on here. This is the one where I found Soul for the first time. Yeah, when it's going with the shield is obviously going to stop anything that isn't Dark Infused. You have to be careful. There's something that happens in the second duel with Soul that I'll talk about when we get to there. I've got a crossbow on here and some rope bombs which I was trying out. My free aims were not on point. I will have to admit I am very, very rusty. I really was just missing every free aim shot. It was ridiculous. Like, my spacing wasn't that good on point. I'm probably going to have to practice with Pyromancy later just to try and get my spacing back down. But yeah, against Soul here, he's quite an aggressive katana user. The standing R1s on them are pretty slow, very bad tracking, so it's normally quite easy to move around those. But he is a smart player. He does know how to fight people with shields. Obviously, you see there, he goes to that one hit, and then he goes straight for the kick, so I'd have to roll, and if I don't, he'd get me, or, you know, possibly break my shield. But as you can see here, I get his health down really low, and then he manages to get two good hits there. I wasn't watching my stamina. I ran out of stamina, so he was able to absolutely smack me about. As you can see here, I was trying to finish him with some Mimi bombs, and I managed to get him with that one. But if you notice, what I could do there is, when he's close to me, obviously I can keep up the R1 spam. When he's not close to me, I have the beams and stuff like that. But one thing you have to be careful is people can just roll straight for your beam, and if you're on low stamina, as you just saw there, I wasn't watching my stamina, and he just rolled through my shot and then just rolling R1 my shield and broke it. which was, yeah, he hit me for some really big damage. I really was not paying attention to my endurance. I think he gets me again the same way in a little bit. And that backstab there, if I'd got that, I would have probably won this one. So yep, again, does the exact same thing. I wasn't watching my endurance, was low on the endurance, tried to go for the weapon art, and he just rolled through and got it. It's unfortunate, but it is something you have to learn from, and yeah, I very much did learn from that here. And this time the bomb bait did not be as effective. He caught me with that poke. GG souls. So yeah, when fighting different sorts of opponents, like especially against physical builds, you have to kind of learn their pattern and obviously learn where to engage. As you can see here, make a little mistake there where he goes, breaks my shield and gets me. Again, there's something I did twice throughout the day, is I wasn't really paying attention to my endurance. I kept getting guard broken. I'm not sure if that's just because I haven't played properly in 6 months or so, or if it's just I wasn't used to the space where I've been playing other things recently. But unlike earlier, I'd been learning from some of the little mistakes I was making here. The weapon art actually does have quite a range. As you saw there, that was probably about the maximum reach that you can get on the weapon art. The recovery on it is actually quite punishable. If you miss that, someone can then obviously punch you with spells, crossbows, or whatever have you at range. And there are other ways that you can get caught when trying to engage. Like my opponent here is using an infused dagger. So what he does is he keeps in close and then just goes to the trades. And yeah, luckily for me that it's got really low damage. But if you notice, he's doing a lot of chip damage here. If he had something like a Murky Hand Scythe, that would be quite the problem. Luckily, the chip from that through the shield isn't too bad. That's, I don't know, I feel like some of the melee options for magic need to be improved. So in this one, I've swapped over to the Ring Knight Straight Sword to show you a little bit of the differences here. So my opponent, again, using a physical weapon, so the shield's going to have no problem with that. So it's going to be about learning where I can go in. Obviously, I've got to be aware that he can parry because he's got a washing pulse to that weapon art. Now, normally the R2 there, like I caught him there with the Ring Knight Straight Sword, doesn't often hit people, but unfortunately for him, he panic rolled back, so it became quite easy. As you can see, I'm trying to move around him to use the hyper armor to go for the trades, but it's going to be one of those cases where it's much easier to catch them with just standard R1s. There are times to use it. Obviously, the hyper armor on this is really good. It can actually trade with one-handed ultras. Can't do with two-handed or like great hammers. It can also one-handed, yeah, great axes too, but again, not two-handed. I'm not sure if it does two-handed great swords. It might be a certain poise breakpoint. I haven't really looked into it. But anyway, as you can see here, my opponent has then decided to give it some legs. Basically, he doesn't like that I'm just playing shield straight sword, and he's out. He's out, boys. Running for the hills. Doesn't want any more of this. So, as you can see, he's trying to avoid me here. I actually swapped from Ring Knight Straight Sword to the Holy Sword, because I thought it'd be better at catching him whilst he was running. So, what I've been realizing... Oh yeah, by the way, look at that. Dies and then pulls the plug. Berserk Badger 88. For shame. But yeah, as you can see there, I swapped from Ring Knight Straight Sword to the Holy Sword, so I thought it'd be good at chasing my opponent. However, it wasn't actually that good at chasing people down, because it's quite straightforward. People can turn the camera and watch you, and they can roll it quite easily. Now, as you can see here, my opponent is using a great shield and a quality weapon, so it's going to be very, very difficult for me to engage. Now, this is the main problem with having no chip options. As you can see here, my weapon is doing basically 1 damage through his shield, and that's because Ring Knight Straight Sword has a little bit of fire. But having that no chip, there's not really any way that I can pressure him. Obviously, the Holy Sword does have the shield break option, but that's not going to go through a great shield. And again, the shield break weapon art is pretty bad. It's very hard, very, very hard to hit someone with that. They need to be almost not paying attention to get caught by it. I tried to pivot backstab my opponent there, miss it. In fact, I tried that a couple of times, but I just keep seeming to miss it. Oh, I love the backswing. Yeah, when your connection isn't that good, you have to be very careful when you decide to roll out from when people are hammering on your shields, otherwise they'll catch you on that backswing. This guy ends up trying to run from me a lot. Now, normally, see what I did there with the little kick? If he was using a Black Knight shield, that would have broken it, but because he's using a great shield, he's got enough stamina to be able to then start running away from me. The good old people who are over level so they can have full damage and obviously a great shields. So then in this one we're getting someone with quick step. So this is something that can be annoying for non-straight sword stuff. My opponent tries some pyromancy, gets hit by the 4-hit combo of that. You have to be careful because people can engage you pretty easily there because you can't go for the 5th hit. Because if you do, it's pretty easy to avoid and then backstab. Luckily, the Ring Knight Straight Sword and the Lothric Holy Sword are both incredibly long. So you can really use that to punish people. Again, you've got to be careful with the weapon up because it is very easy to parry. He thought I was going to go for it there, so he tried to set up parry me. Just no bait today. Just run there and backstab him. So he swaps over to a spear here. Again, trying to parry spam me. Oh, if he'd actually gone for the parry there, he probably could have caught that one very easily. Don't know why he went for the Perseverance cast Tears of Denial. That didn't make any sense to me. But yeah, he has no regen, so Dagger will finish that. So this is someone who is using a Yorm's Great Machete. Now, someone told me earlier on my last build that because I was using a Dark Infused Great Machete, which is shorter, and he was telling me that the right way to use it is offhand Yorms. Now, here's the problem with offhand Yorms. Everyone is incredibly easy to beat if you have a shield. This person, I don't know what his skill level is, but he is incredibly easy for me to outpunish, outpunish, and just put on all the pressure here. Like, even there, I can trade with that one-handed swing with the Ring Knight Straight Sword. Holy Sword, I could keep some range to punch it. Manages to hit me there once without a trade because I mistimed the spacing, which isn't too bad. But again, he's going for the two-handed Yorms here, and you can just circle backstab that very easily. It's so hard for them to put any pressure on me, and that he was a complete pushover because of it. So this guy is trying latency Dark Moonblade, and again, it's see, he's invested 60 points into Faith to do maybe 30 more damage per hit. It's not that good. So as you can see, the reach of the Ring Knight Straight Sword of the Holy Sword is very good. They've both got incredibly good distance, but as you can see, the R1s of the Ring Knight Straight Sword do more damage, but the weapon art isn't as useful. Yes, the hyper armor is nice, but you have to be wary. It's very easy to punish. It's very easy to avoid. It's one of those things that it doesn't very easily push into your opponent. And even against this guy here, at first I'm doing incredibly well, but you make some mistakes and they really start to be able to push some damage against you. Again there, I made the rookie shield error of not watching my stamina and taking hits on the shield when I could have very easily rolled away. Again, look, if you notice, I was trying to pivot backstab him and I messed up like before, where last time I got shield broken, that time I only took one hit. This guy switching to R1 spam. So his idea with the old poising was just gone. So he's now trying to get me with that. A little bit of latency there. If you saw him with the crossbow, but he was still able to get his running attack off. But again, the crossbows are very good to recover that. Now against this guy here, now he's swapped over to using Iron Flesh with Valahar. I don't know, I guess that idea in his head was amazing, but he didn't realise that you can backstab that very easily. Obviously Iron Flesh is just worn off there. So I'm switching over to some Perseverance stuff myself so I can put on some pressure. Again, you can use the Perseverance gimmick with both builds, so it is pretty useful, and you can have a skilled caster so you can still do some damage. And the good thing, again, about the shield is if you can just really keep up the pressure. Like, he was silly there and ran out of stamina, and now I'm pushing him on the back foot, and he's trying to fight back into me. But the weapon art, having that hyper armor, is just very easily able to trade into that. Even against, say, some of the things that you would think might be more annoying. Like, this guy here is using a dark red-hilted halberd, so he can do some good shield chip, but unfortunately the halberd's not got the best tracking. I can very easily move around him, and I've got the shield up to be able to set up these backstabs here and move around him, do some damage, and of course set up the weapon art trades. Again, very easy to roll catch, you keep up the pressure, and that's, again, comes to the favour of both these weapons. They are very good at catching people roll around you, but the thing that I found I was struggling with, earlier you saw me struggling to get the last hit on a mage who was just running away with Blood Ring. And this time here, luckily he doesn't have Blood Ring, so he's actually possible to be roll call. But both times I was finding it very hard to really apply that pressure to get those hits. because yeah, even though you'd think that both their weapon arts, the main difference would be their chasing ability, it's because of the actual speed and startup. The Holy Sword is actually very easy to roll through. Ring Knight Straight Sword even easier just to outrun. So where I originally thought the argument here was going to be damage versus chasing, I find it was very hard to chase with either of them. Like, if I was on a curve sword build, I could run circles around a mage, constantly punish their rolls, fire surge. If they start trying to set up a slow spell, obviously get in something like a Chaos Bed Vestiges and other things like that. But I wasn't really able to put on the pressure. Like I said earlier, it's probably from me not playing for a little while with straight swords and playing other games. But when it came down to it, what I was finding was the main difference here was I was using Holy Sword more to punish. So the weapon art was punishing whiffs, punishing parries, punishing other startups like items and stuff, whereas Ring Knight Straight Sword I was using to kind of force trades, same way you would with a greatsword. So the main difference has to be the fact that I think Holy Sword is better at punishing, whereas the Ring Knight Straight Sword, it's just kind of better at playing a little bit more aggressive. But the problem with both of them here is the lack of chip. So when you fight anyone with a shield, both of them are going to struggle a lot. Holy Sword, yes, like I said earlier, does have the shield break attack, but that is so hard to land on someone. Like, you really have to be playing someone who has no idea that that's even a move in the game to be able to land it. Or if they're just not paying attention and they just think they can block everything. Like, yes, you've seen me be guard broke maybe 4 or 5 times this video so far, but each one of those times was just because I should have rolled when I was blocking. So that's more user error than weapon error. And again, the amount of error that you have to make to be able to get caught by the weapon art shield breaker, ridiculous. It's not really worth discussing as a competitive option. So as you see here, my opponent bled through his stamina and just getting punished. So I've got quite a few more duels going on here for the difference between Ring Knight Straight Sword and Holy Sword. What I start doing is between the fights is I start switching between them more. So fighting someone here who's obviously got a shield himself, he can do chip, I'm not doing chip, and he is outdamping me quite a lot on these trades here. Now if I had Holy Sword, I'd be even worse scenario because of how little the damage is. Taking trades there, it's just really not a good option. Luckily Ring Knight Straight Sword has a lot more damage. Now this time I'm fighting Soul Glacies, who you saw me fight twice with Holy Sword, and there's actually quite a bit of a difference here. Whereas Holy Sword I was being very defensive and I was getting pushed back and he managed to break my guard twice. If you notice with Ring Knight Straight Sword, I'm being mostly the aggressive one here. So I get caught by one attack there, but if you notice I'm playing closer to him. I don't need to create space for the weapon up. Because I don't need to create space for the weapon up, I was able to keep on him, punish him more, and really show off the weaknesses of the katana, which again is just close range R1s because they're slower than straight swords, they don't have as good tracking as straight swords, and without their running attacks, which is their main thing, it's very hard for them to apply damage back to you. So this time we're fighting someone with an ultra. Now with the Holy Sword I could create distance and then obviously use the beam to punish everything. With the Ring Knight Straight Sword I kind of have to keep in his face and roll around his hits. For some reason my opponent thinks that he will do better with the hand axe. Again, he's going for some quick steps, but I was able to catch him with the weapon art, and my goodness, I was able to get him with the 5th hit. If he had just rolled at me I would have been backstabbed very, very easily. So remember what I was saying about parry kings. Now this guy is someone who kept trying to set up parry me earlier. With having the Holy Sword here, what I can do is I can just space his whiffs and then go for safely for the weapon art punish. Because look, every time he wants to parry me, again trying to parry at the end there, I can just go for the weapon art and it's very easy to punish them. Now, against stuff like people only spam running attacks, you want to be able to use a weapon that can keep on and be much more aggressive. Holy Sword, I would find that my opponent would be able to run around and keep catching me running attacks. But if you notice with this Pyromancer, because I was being more aggressive with the the Ring Knight Straight Sword, I was keeping in his face, he couldn't create distance through running attacks. And obviously, if they're not using a weapon like a Straight Sword or a Curved Sword, their standing R1s are normally going to be terrible, because everything compared to a Straight Sword or a Curved Sword with just standing R1s is pretty mediocre. So if you can keep in their face, which is what I was doing with Ring Knight Straight Sword, it's very easy to pressure them and just to overwhelm them. And you just got to not be too defensive. So Holy Sword is better as a punishing defensive weapon, whereas Ring Knight Straight Sword is much better as an aggressive weapon. If you notice here, we've got a caster who keeps trying to create distance to get me with the fireballs. And because of the Holy Sword, I can punish it every time he tries to set it up. This time he manages to get me because I was swapping rings, but if you notice, every time he tries to create distance there, I was able to just keep punching his spells. I think the only school of magic that can safely get off spells is obviously sorcerers, because their home in soul mass is too fast to be punished by the holy sword, and their great soul arrow can be safely done after you've taken a shot. So if I've already fired the holy sword, the recovery is long enough that he can safely fire a soul arrow before I can then shoot again. He'd obviously be able to roll. So if you notice in the situation here against someone using a Pontiff Knight curved sword, which again is a physical weapon, I would much rather have the Ring Knight straight sword because it's longer, I can be aggressive, I can set up trades with the hyper armor. Again, you've got to be very careful, and passive opponent will be able to just easily punish you with those running attacks and just whiff punishing. But whereas the holy sword, the weapon art isn't going to be as useful because your opponent's going to be always in your face, he's going to be rolling through your hits, and then he's got the much faster R1s. But mixing in stuff with like crossbows, bombs, I was able to really easily set my opponent and punish him. Against things like, again, as I've said with ultras, it's one of those things. In a 1v1 scenario, they're just not useful. They're only really decent when you're ganking as the ganker. Because, or obviously against anyone who's not a PvP expert. Like, I know a lot of people like to use the arguments of saying, oh, well, I do great in blah, blah. It's, again, it doesn't matter if you're fighting someone who's not a PvPer. If you're killing a PvE player, everything's viable here. So it's not really something worth discussing. So if we look again, showing this guy, I actually swapped to the Holy Sword when I knew it was him, just because I knew that he'd be trying to parry spam me. If I was going for the Ring Knight weapon art, he'd obviously get the parries off and probably one-shot me, but with the Holy Sword, I'm really able to punish that and push it. Now, as you can see here, I've got someone who very much did not want me buffing. He did not want me buffing, and I was a little bit salty that he failed. I'm not going to lie, I don't care if someone wants to punish a buff, but I do generally feel insulted when they're not good at it. So my opponent here, playing passive, and again has a parry shield, so I can safely just use the weapon art on those setup parries. Noticing we're getting a little bit of a trend here. Against someone who's using an aggressive weapon like a curved sword or a straight sword, I prefer to be swapping to the Ring Knight straight sword. Against an opponent that's using something like a great sword or an ultra, you know, a defensive weapon, I prefer to be having the holy sword. So you can actually carry both, because it's actually the exact same build that uses both of them. I've got roughly 30% defenses here, 20% magic defenses, and I can use both weapons on the same weight. Ring Knight straight sword is 0.5 heavier, so you have to make that and take that into consideration when you're using your ring swaps. Funny enough, I didn't actually swap to Red Tearstone Ring in any of these duels. A couple of times it probably would have been good to do that. But like I said before, the two main differences seem to be here is Ring Knight Straight Sword is better for fighting an aggressive opponent, whereas the Holy Sword is better for fighting a defensive opponent. Against someone who's just going to run away from you with Blood Ring and probably magic, might want to bring a spear. Just, you know, design your build to be able to take a spear. I don't know, maybe Ring Knight spear because of obviously the range on that, a plow or something that you can infuse quality that will be pretty decent to be able to punish them. So even say the Reddit meta, you know, the weapon that everyone complains is completely OP, my opponent immediately swaps from his Ring Knight paired greatswords, because I could just outspace those L1s and punish him. And even on Japanese connection here, he's not going to be able to catch me with those little laggy L1s. And even actually there, Ring Knight straight sword, going for the weapon art, I was able to just easily outspace that and then hit it with the weapon art. But again, even if I didn't have that, you can walk in between the second and third hits and just R1 them. It doesn't have very good hyper armor between them. So again, another hyper armor weapon, swapping over to the Holy Sword, keeping up the aggression. It's good times. So here is the mage from earlier. Notice he swapped to the Twin Prince's Greatsword. I guess he liked my Holy Sword option. This time, I'm actually playing it a little bit more aggressively. I'm keeping on him, I was backstabbing him, and because I've decided that I want to play more aggressively, I've actually swapped to the Ring Knight Straight Sword. Ooh, that was a very nice weapon art there. But yeah, so I've now got to the point where I'm instinctively in these duels swapping between them depending on what my opponent's using. So when I want to be aggressive, Ring Knight Straight Sword. When I want to be defensive, Holy Sword. there were a lot of good duels that I actually had with some people in this throughout the day as well. No, unfortunately, not all of them I could fit in here because, like I said, we're doing some post-commentary today, and I think I played 4 or 5 hours trying to stream Soul Glacies. I only gone 3 times, and if you look at even all these people here, most of them are all different. It's very rare that I see the same person twice. I don't think I saw anyone 3 times. I might have done, but again, there is a lot of life still in this game. I know I'm meant to be talking about the weapons here, but I was generally impressed by just how active they were. But I think the one that I'm going to go in the closing scene here is against the Dark build, just to show how much superior just a Dark Lothric or Gotthards is compared to any of the physical straight swords, just because of shield versus shield. See, the main difference here is I can't really get through his shield. As you saw there, I was able to say him up, but I hit the shield once, then I immediately kicked. So if he wasn't ready for that and didn't roll, I was able to break his shield. Unfortunately, I was not ready to then follow up myself. Now, I am managing to get in a few hits and trades here, but for him, it's a lot safer than it is for me, because he can hit my shield and do 70 chip damage. So as you can see here, look, see, I didn't realise he was dark, and he just hit my shield 4 times. So that's essentially the same as another 2 R1s. Actually, it's probably somewhere between 1 and 2, yes, about 280 probably if he's doing 70 chip. But yeah, so he's able to put in a lot more damage and a lot more pressure. And now that he's on last hit, it's very hard for me to engage and get that. So yeah, this guy I actually played again a second time. We got to a roughly similar scenario like we are now, but the duel went a separate way. I did want to include the clip, but unfortunately it's somewhere later in the duels and I ran out. It's not an excuse, quite you. But yeah, so again, physical nowhere near as good as obviously using the Dark Infused. So if you want to use the best straight sword, go with something like Lothric Night Sword, Gotthards and Dark Infused then. But if you want to have some really fun games, then yeah, definitely switch between Holy Sword and Ring Knight Straight Sword.